All right, so welcome back to WCHS grade 10s. Hopefully you enjoyed your long 4-day Thanksgiving weekend. We are definitely at the midway point now. We have covered half the textbook, we have covered half the content. It's a good opportunity for us to look back. Looking back, there's some work that we need to do with our A2, with our essays, and that's the purpose of this quick lecture. So please read the comments that I wrote on the side of your essays. Next time you do an essay for me, I'm probably not going to put comments on it, I'm just going to mark it. So I put lots of comments on the side, making some suggestions, and I do want to see you take a look at those. At the same time, I'd like to look at 2 sample essays here with you today, just so we can identify some of the steps that you may have forgotten to include into your essay. So this first essay begins. Globalization is one of the most controversial issues of our time. So what's the purpose of that sentence? Purpose of that first sentence is to define what the theme is. It announces the theme of the essay. And instead of having a very formulaic sentence like the theme of the source is globalization, this writer introduces the theme like that. Globalization is one of the most controversial issues of our time. So, once again, you're going to be writing the same essay again, and hopefully next time you'll have an even stronger essay than you had this time. So, you might want to take down some ideas. So the first sentence is introducing the theme. Then the second sentence. Many people see it as a force for good that helps connect people from across the globe, while others see it as the destruction of cultures and identities. That second sentence did 2 things. It defines globalization without being very formulaic, very just straightforward. Straightforward's an S, a 60, but an S definition would be globalization means the interconnectedness of mankind. That's very straightforward, that's an S. This student embedded the definition. Many people see it as a force for good that helps connect people. So this part here, that helps connect people from across the globe, that's embedding the definition. Showing that here's the theme, globalization, here's an embedding of the definition. I'm going to show you that I know what it means. But that was a very ambitious sentence, because there's more than just a definition being embedded in it. It also is talking about the division of society. So another step that we need to do in our intro is talk about the division of society. Here we have many people see it as a force for good, while others see it as the destruction of cultures and identities. So somewhere in your intro, you need to have the theme, you need to show us that you understand what the theme means, and you need to explore the fact that not everybody agrees about this theme, that there might be a division of society surrounding it. This student's done that in those first 2 sentences. These are steps that a number of people forgot to do. And when you forget to do steps like that, your intro, your analysis becomes incomplete. And incomplete analysis really limits your paper at 58%. Which, 58% is a passing mark, but it's probably not the mark you wanted. So, then the student continues. There's another opinion as well, one that is less well known. That the thought that globalization is neither good nor bad, but a reflection of humanity. So the purpose of these 2 sentences is to begin to explore the ideological perspective of the source. And if I can't find anywhere in your intro some kind of exploration of the perspective of the source, then your paper really is incomplete. So that's another step that we're looking for in your intro, is an exploration of the ideological perspective of the source. And again, the student is a mature writer in the sense that this student has embedded that idea. The source would most definitely fall into that third category. According to the source, comma, parentheses, globalization, built on the natural cornerstone that the strong do what they can or they want, and the weak suffer what they must, provides a mirror into the exploitive nature of mankind. So now they have repeated the source. The student has repeated the source. Now we need to break down the nuances of the source. So when I say nuances, I mean those small elements, the building blocks of the source. So now the student's going to break down some of those big rocks, those building blocks of the source, beginning with the word cornerstone. In construction, the cornerstone is the stone that supports the entire structure, or in this case, argument. So now the student has shown that they understand this big rock, that happens to be a rock, a cornerstone, this term that is critical. Understanding the term is critical to understanding the perspective being presented and the conversation you're meant to dive into. So before you can have a thesis statement, you need to explore, well, what is it that I'm responding to? Your thesis is your response to the source. You can't respond to a source until after you've analyzed it. And in order to analyze it, you have to show that you understand what the big rocks of the source mean. One of the big rocks here is the word cornerstone. So the student has said, in construction, the cornerstone is the stone that supports the entire structure. Or in this case, argument. Straight out of class, right? We talked about that in class. So that's good. A natural cornerstone would be one that has been part of our society for thousands of years. And calling it a natural cornerstone would be a way of justifying it. Again, this sentence does two things for me, right? It says, you know what, I was paying attention during that ancient globalization mini unit when we talked about different cornerstones of society. You know, do we have a religious cornerstone? Do we have a social cornerstone? Do we have an economic, a political? What is the cornerstone of our society? So this one says a natural cornerstone would be one that has been part of a society for thousands of years, and calling it a natural cornerstone would be a way of justifying it. So there's a tip of the hat back to that part of the unit when we talked about what cornerstones should society be founded on. And then it starts playing around with the word natural there. And why is it significant that the language of the source uses the word natural? Because it's meant to try to justify what's happening, right? People will say something's natural to justify it. So now we're going to get into the heart of the language of the source. The strong do what they want and the weak suffer what they must, or the survival of the fittest, says that people with power should use it to accomplish whatever they feel like, while those without power are left to suffer the consequences. So what we've done here is the student has taken that key sentence, the strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must, connected it to related vocabulary, survival of the fittest. So one of the things we need to do is connect vocabulary. You need to show me that your mind is mapping the curriculum. So when we say this, it connects to social Darwinism, it connects to survival of the fittest, it connects to, the idea that the strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must. And that's what's done in that sentence. There's also some paraphrasing happening there. So sometimes it's good to, instead of just keep repeating that same line, the strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must, let's paraphrase it. And let's include related words like power as well. So not only did we include a related idea like survival of the fittest, we linked it to the concept of power, and we talked about suffering the consequences. So rather than keep using suffer what they must, we're going to paraphrase and say suffer the consequences. This is an idea that has been around since ancient Greece, probably even before that. So what does that do? That's giving us context. So somewhere in the intro, you have to establish context. When did this idea come from? By referencing ancient Greece, we can understand that the student has some kind of understanding of the Athenian, Molossian origins of that quote. Social Darwinists, and the D in Darwinist is a capital D, so one of the things that's easy to mark is language, and especially proper nouns. Please, before you write your next essay, take some time to look at the vocab that you're planning to use, and if it's proper nouns, then see if you can figure out which words need to be capitalized. Social Darwinists use this idea as a form of I'm not going to be able to say it. I know the word in my brain. Sometimes my brain can't read well.
Justification?
This is what I'm trying to say. Because if they have power, they can set aside their morals and use it to achieve their goals at the expense of the weak. So why do they use it? Why do social Darwinists use this idea? Because it justifies them preying upon the weak. Now, another term that this source uses that we have to wrestle with, unpack, is the term mirror. Mirror doesn't have any personality or identity itself. Instead, reflecting back whatever it sees. If something were to provide a mirror, that would give us a lens with which we could view something, in this case, the exploitive nature of mankind. So, did you talk about the mirror metaphor in your intro? If not, you should. You shouldn't have scored above 58 on your essay, because that's a big rock. You're writing this same essay again. Next time, if you don't have the mirror in, you're getting a 58 or lower. So you have to unpack those big rocks. There's lots of them in this intro, including that idea of mirror. Why do we have the mirror there? What's the purpose of this metaphor of a mirror? No matter what good may come of globalization, it orientated from a place of greed. The desire to benefit at the expense of others is clearly expressed by our quote. It is very apparent here as that Cornerstone was built on greed and exploitation. The ideological perspective of the source. So we want to make sure we use that term somewhere. Again, if you didn't use it, it's becoming repetitive, but you should score at most an incomplete for the analysis. The ideological perspective of the source is most definitely realism. The belief that for one to benefit, another must lose. And you can connect that to the zero-sum theory. The danger of exploitation due to globalization may, while being severe in the past, is now much weaker. So now we're trying to bring the source up to contemporary understanding, right? So we're going to talk about the continued significance of the problem exposed by the source. So, somewhere you should be talking about a problem, solution, is the problem identified by the source still significant? And that's what we're meandering into here. So other steps that you should have done in your intro is talk about that problem that the source is introducing. And is it still significant? And that's where we're headed here. Today, if one nation were to attempt to exploit another under the context of globalization, trade and any friendly relations between the countries would be completely shut down. Even if the country attempting the exploitation were a world superpower, they would not fare well against the repercussions from countries throughout the world. So we're talking about trade sanctions, we're talking about moral sanctions, we're talking about marginalizing even the powerful, that in a League of Nations or a United Nations, there's strength in collective security. That's what this is alluding to. But even 100 years ago, countries invaded others and stole their land and resources, and other nations would consider it, or did consider it, fair play. On the other hand, many groups have used their power for good. So now this is talking about, wait a minute, maybe the ideological perspective of the source is biased, that there's some assumptions that the ideological perspective of the source made. So did you talk about the bias and the assumptions? That's the foundation of the ideological perspective of the source. Here, in order to explore the bias, the assumptions of the ideological perspective of the source, the writer is exploring the idea that, no, people are actually using their power for good, and that's something the source overlooked. Organizations like the Red Cross will provide international aid to people in need, or less recently, the Silk Road, a network of trade routes across much of Asia where people could trade with each other with no fear of war or robbery. However, globalization has always been a double-edged sword. and the negative interactions have always outweighed or outnumbered the good ones. So now we're building towards this is going to be my response to the source. Globalization was built upon greed for power and resources. Globalization built on the cornerstone, blah, 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 provides a mirror into the exploited nature of mankind. And there's your thesis, last sentence of the intro, right where it was meant to be. It's a statement and not a question. So this is one example of an intro, one example of analysis. And you can see that the analysis is an entirely different writing assignment. An essay in social studies, an argumentative essay, is really two assignments. First, you have to analyze the source, and then you respond to it. And if all you do is respond to it, you cannot achieve higher than a 58. And you may get a 0. If you don't analyze the source, if we can't mark you in that category, it's an INS, insufficient. Insufficient exploration of this source. So these are steps that you need to do next time. So, if you don't do those steps next time, you'll be getting 58 or less. Now, I want to show you another one. Another student, another intro, another analysis of the source. So sometimes it's beneficial to see more than one attempt at doing the same thing. So we're going to look at another excellent analysis of the source. And you'll be able to see some of the same steps. And again, you're going to be writing this exact same essay again. This is the essay that's on your final exam. The same essay. So you have about 4 weeks before we write the final exam. Because of course, it's quartered. We're halfway done. We got about 4 weeks left. And in 4 weeks, I'm going to expect you to be able to do this and then add this next unit. I'm going to get you to add something more to the body, which is a therefore. Therefore, we need to do something in order to have a future. And that will come out of related issues 3 and 4. So you're going to be writing this essay again, and next time you write it, it's worth 9% of the course. So let's make sure you're figuring this out. So this is a quote about globalization and the nature of mankind. You can dive right in like that, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that sentence. That sentence tells me the theme, globalization and nature of mankind. And I like how the student includes the idea that it's not just globalization here. Globalization's a theme that's going to actually allow us to explore the nature of mankind. That's the real theme here. Globalization is the interconnectedness and interdependence of mankind. Again, that's a definition, very straightforward, but it works. It's there. Step done. Check mark, right? Accomplished. It is how we connect and trade with other people. The author says that the cornerstone of globalization is the strong feeding on the weak. I don't think we need to verbatim repeat that quote again and again and again. What we can do, what the student just did so well, is the student paraphrased it. Paraphrasing it, the author says the cornerstone of globalization is the strong feeding on the weak. Paraphrasing it like that is more skillful than just repeating it. That's a good sentence. A cornerstone, in the architectural sense, is the backbone of the structure. It holds everything else up. So now we have two different students, both doing an exceptional job, both saying, you know what, cornerstone's a key term here. I better show that I know what it means, and I better show that I understand the significance of its use. If I don't do that, I can't be comprehensive about it. I can't be perceptive. The cornerstone in the architectural sense is the backbone of the structure that holds everything else up. Without the cornerstone, the entire building would crumble and fall. In a metaphorical sense, a cornerstone is an important quality or feature that other systems and arguments rely on as their foundation. So now we're exploring the idea that cornerstone is being used in a non-traditional way within the source. You can see how the architectural cornerstone relates to the metaphorical one, as they are both used as foundation or backbones, and without them, the things built on them collapse. There can be different types of metaphorical cornerstones, such as political, cultural, or economic. So this student goes into more depth about the cornerstones. The other student alluded to the idea that historically there have been different types of cornerstones societies have been built on. This student said, you know what, I want to mention them. That's more specific, that's more purposeful. The source is saying that the cornerstone of globalization is, boom, now we're going to throw in the quote. We have to, right? We're excited about that quote. That's a good quote. The strong here could mean many different things. Remember when we talked about that? So, well, it says the strong could do what they can, we suffer what they must. What does it mean to be strong? That's it. That's a key term. That's a big rock. We have to unpack it. The strong here could mean many different things. It could be a military strong with lots of manpower, tanks and weapons, ABC weapons, things like that. Or maybe a moral strong like Gandhi, or even a political strong. So somewhere in your intro, next time that you write this same essay, you need to define strong for me. You need to talk about the complexity of that term. And by unlocking different definitions of the strong, we can really explore the significance of this topic. If the weak are suffering at the hands of the strong, what does that suffering look like? Through history, we see multiple examples of the suffering the weak are forced to endure. So we got Hitler's Germany, we have the Jewish people being tortured, we have today, and we have children that work long hours to sustain your lifestyle, and we have the transatlantic slave trade, where people are brutally beaten and maimed. So, the student has used historical and contemporary evidence to further the perspective of the source. So the source says suffering, but we can infer that when it says suffering, it means things like this. So in our analysis, we can use evidence to further the perspective being presented. That's what's being done here. Because when it says suffering, this is what suffering looks like. This is evidence of suffering that it could be alluding to. The list could go on and on. This theme of the strong feeding on the weak is prominent throughout history and exposes how we are exploited people by nature. So now we're circling back to that human nature part of the theme. The ideological perspective of this source is anti-globalization, against globalization. So, being that this course is about globalization, we really need you to make a statement like that. Is this reflecting or rejecting globalization? We really want you to see that. Again, one of many steps that really, if you didn't do that, I should be giving you an incomplete. Because that's the heart of the assignment, is that you need to find an ideological perspective connected to globalization, and in its essence, you should be able to say it's either pro or anti-globalization. The language of the source makes the author's tone, right? Tone. So we can talk about the tone. The author's tone come across as somber and anti-globalization. They believe that globalization is flawed because we are flawed and exploitive by nature. The problem the source is presenting, the problem that it's presenting, right? The steps we've covered in the first 5 weeks of the course. So one of the main steps is every source is going to be presenting a problem. The problem the source is presenting is that when we globalize, the strong feed on the weak, and one group suffers so that the other can get ahead. So I definitely, there's lots of good things about both of these papers. And the nice thing is, you can now combine the both and write even better than either of them for next time. Because there's some stuff that this one's doing that the other one didn't, and there's stuff that the other one did that this one didn't do. It addresses how this exploitation is a natural cornerstone and cannot be changed. So the solution we can infer the author wants is for people not to globalize, to isolate, right? Because when we globalize, we put ourselves in danger of suffering. When we globalize, it is too cruel and brutal. There are multiple examples of this, but a good one is the Chinese and their century of humiliation. Using some evidence to further the perspective. We're not writing an essay yet, we're not taking a position, but we're saying here's some evidence that you could use to continue the position presented. That's different. This isn't evidence so that I can tell you what I think. This is evidence so that I can explain what they think, so then I can tell you what I think. The Chinese and the British globalized, and the British exploited them, which led to a massive drug crisis in China and multiple wars. This exploitation is quite a significant problem. The weak shouldn't have to suffer at the hands of others. We've seen atrocities that occur at the extremes of this exploitation. There's a division of society through social Darwinists and realists believe that it is natural and that the strong have the right to feed on the weak because they're obviously the most evolved and most advanced of their people. They believe that the weak are meant to be manipulated for the strong's benefit. So now we're circling back to related philosophy. We're connecting to social Darwinism. We're connecting to survival of the fittest. So lots of good stuff there. Others, though, people like Gandhi, and you're right, Gandhi should be a big G, right? You don't have to be perfect to get 100%. Especially in an in-class essay. There's going to be some mistakes. So Gandhi should be a big G, but that's okay. Others, though, people like Gandhi believe that the weak shouldn't have to suffer. Mankind is not just exploitive. We have multiple examples of humans being kind and generous and empathetic. Like people who help rebuild structures destroyed in hurricanes, or build schools and wells in developing countries, or countries that donate relief aid after natural disasters. Now, it's safe to say that after reading both of those intros, we would say that they, in terms of the analysis of the source, I have a rubric, and these are my options. For it to be a P, it's a minimal understanding of the source. It's more than that. It's not just a minimal understanding. For it to be an L or an incomplete or a 40, it's incomplete, it's limited. There's something missing. It's definitely not something missing. They covered all the big rocks. S is straightforward and generalized. So to go beyond an S, there has to be something purposeful done. There's lots of times when you can say, wow, this sentence is very purposeful. They're purposefully attaching evidence to further the perspective of the source. They're purposefully connecting it to social Darwinism. They're purposefully connecting it to, Gandhi, or they're purposely connecting it to the century of humiliation in China. So that kind of stuff elevates you from an S to a PF. And then in E, 100% is when there's something insightful and sophisticated. Another word that really describes both of these today is comprehensive. Comprehensive meaning, what more could you do? They covered the source, they analyzed it. It's an E. So, analysis of the source is a critical first step. That if you do an incomplete job of it, I cannot award you higher than an S on any other category. And next time, when we write the same essay, I'm going to be looking for those steps. And if you miss them, you're getting an incomplete. Especially since we just went over the essay that's on your final exam. This is it. No surprise, this is the one. These are the steps you need to do. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is argumentation. Before we do so, any questions about the analysis? So I really think it makes it clear when I say it's 2 steps. See the analysis as a separate assignment. I must first analyze, and then I can respond. And most of the time it's one paragraph. It might be a big paragraph. The second one we looked at, the paragraph was nearly 2 pages. But that's okay, because we spent a lot of time on this. So when we do the next essay, when we do this essay again, you might be able to just use that again. There might be a little bit more that comes up in the next two related issues, but these two students won't have to add too much to the analysis of the source because the source won't change. Just our understanding of how to respond to it might. So for example, here's a response. I like that it's in bold, easy to find, the last sentence of the intro. And the wording of the thesis really opens herself up to a strong argumentation in the body. Although mankind is naturally exploitive, globalization should not be built on the cornerstone of the strong feeding on the weak, because it is cruel and unsustainable. That's a thesis that you could use at the end of the year. That's a thesis big enough that you could include the entire course under it. That's an excellent thesis statement. So looking at argumentation, we want to make sure that in the body, our argumentation leads the paper. So what's the purpose of the paper after the thesis? The purpose of the paper after the thesis statement isn't for you to give me a history lesson. And somewhere within the history lesson, I need to find your argument. And somewhere within your argument, I need to find a connection to the source. If you're leading it up to the marker to do those steps for you, for argumentation, your mark's going to be low. Because we're not going to see your paper as being purposeful. It may not even be straightforward if we're looking at evidence and we're asking ourselves, so what, who cares? I don't see a connection here. Please make the connection for me. So the next part of our lesson on A2 is argumentation. The analysis of source is a mark out of 6. Argumentation is a mark out of 8. It's very critical that we do this well. This is the purpose of the paper. The reason why we analyze the source is so that we can respond to it. So everything we did was just so we can get to this point. So we want to make sure we do a strong job with it. So I do like this type of thesis statement because it allows us to have multiple arguments within it. Although. And an although is a thesis statement that explores the to what extent part of the source. And although thesis statement says, you know what, you're right about something, but you're wrong about something else. Therefore, this is what we need to do. That's the although, but therefore. You can get 100% and take a position on one of the extremes and say it's always great or always bad, but it's hard to do that. So if you happen to be napping right now and your mom gives me an email saying, how come my son or daughter is struggling in essays? I'm going to say, well, because they slept through it. I mean, half an hour into class, they fell asleep. So that's kind of on them at this point. Because this is it. We don't have any time during the day for you to come in to do one-on-one stuff, right? We don't have flex. We don't have that time built into our schedule. And although you could come in at 8:30 in the morning and talk about essays, we have a lot of content to cover still. So this is it. This is our last talk about essays. So you need to get it. So I have lots of people starting to fall asleep half an hour into the workday. Say, oh man, I've worked a half an hour today. I better have a nap. I'm not sure what kind of success that's going to lead to. Not sure. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson gets up at 3:30 in the morning to work out. He doesn't have to, but he does because something's driving him to be better. If you fall asleep at 9:30 in class, you need to look inside for a drive. So we need a thesis statement A thesis statement that's going to allow us to have an argument that will drive our paper. I don't want your paper organized around evidence. It's not a report. If you're going to give me a report, then it's going to have to be something that is cited. Report's a completely different assignment. Report, I'm going to want you to get into the fine minutia of history. If you're going to write a report, let's write a report. You guys want to write reports? We can do reports. But you're going to need 10 to 15 different references. You're going to need references that are primary and secondary. And honestly, the type of evidence that you guys provide in here, if this was a report, would be way too simplified. We're not writing reports, we're writing essays. So if we're writing an essay, then what we need to do is allow our argument to drive our paper. So, how does that happen? It begins with a strong thesis statement. So I'm suggesting to you now that we have 4 weeks left before we write this essay again. And here's a thesis statement that is an excellent thesis statement. And the reason why it's important to have your thesis statement figured out now is so that while we study the last 2 units of the year, you're really putting together your argumentation and evidence. You're planning your essay. Every day in class, we're working towards this essay again. So, every day in class, we're looking at, although, you know what, you're right, mankind is naturally exploitive. So that's what I would say, argument number 1. This is the first part of the body. Although mankind is naturally exploitive, I'm going to cover that first body paragraph. Mankind is naturally exploitive is something that I'm going to prove at the beginning of my paper. So that after the marker is done reading that section of the body, the marker is going to say, you know what? You've convinced me. This is very convincing. Mankind is naturally exploitive. That's argument number 1. So over the next 4 weeks, you're going to add to your understanding of the natural exploitive nature of mankind. You're going to add to your understanding of what it means, the nature of mankind. So although mankind is naturally exploitive, and you can see here that the first body paragraph begins with that argument. Mankind is naturally exploitive. There's a logical organization that leads to a stronger essay. Because now the essay begins, or is divided into, say, 3 smaller essays. One essay proving mankind is naturally exploitive. The next part, globalization should not be built on the cornerstone of a strong feeding on the weak because it is cruel. That's the next part. We shouldn't do this, A2, because it's cruel. And then the third part, A3, argument 3, it is not sustainable. That's a great structure. So it's important to not see an essay as one moment in time. That if you think you're going to be successful, at this point, even if you think you're going to pass, think you're going to pass the next essay and only think about it the day of or the week of, you're not going to do well. You need to start thinking of these subdivided arguments as we get ready for it. So you have 4 weeks, and in those 4 weeks, keep looking for these 3 things. In every class, we're covering these 3 things. So you're creating an inventory of these 3 things. And the reason why we're doing this in grade 10 is by the time we get to grade 12, the problem is you'll be expected to write this essay, but you won't know the topic in advance like this. This year, because it's a learning year, we're giving you the essay topic. We're saying, hey, we're writing the same topic again on the final. Come Social 30, there may be 5 or 6 various essays that could be on the diploma. We don't know which one for sure. So we can't just say these are the 3 things to look for. There might be 5 or 6 arguments that you need to be creating with 3 sub-arguments of each. You may have 18 things that you're keeping an inventory of. You need to pick up the student behavior now, because the course gets a lot harder then. We've had students that get 90s and 10 that go into 30-2. Big jump. Right? Big jump. So this year's all about skill development. And this is one of the 2 writing assignments. We want to make sure that you understand how to do an A2. So, I cannot understate how important today is. So it's quite alarming when people are napping. So, here we go. Here's your argument. Mankind is naturally exploitive. Then, we connect it to evidence. Now, when we connect it to evidence, we want to make sure that the evidence is more than just straightforward. We want to make sure that the evidence is at least specific. How do you get to specific in evidence? Well, let's include some numbers. Let's include some specific case studies, right? So we have some numbers here. We have references to very specific case studies. So if I'm reading through this, I'm saying, how is it specific? Well, it's not just talking about going to Africa for resources. It's saying we're going there for rubber and gold and diamonds. It's more specific, right? It's more purposeful. That's stronger. And then there's language, like the word commodity. Another thing that we can do in order to build our essays up is to really create an inventory of vocabulary. This next unit, or units, related to issues 3 and 4, we're going to be talking about a lot of language. We're going to be talking about, the death of birth. We're going to be talking about language that I'm wanting you to be able to use this year and in grade 12. And again, there's nothing I can do for you if you sleep through it and then you come to me after and say, oh, what can I do? I only got 32% on this essay. I'll be like, yep. So you can see here that it's not just about the century of humiliation. We're going to talk about the Boxer Rebellion. We're going to talk about communism. We're going to talk about specific stuff. Not just going to talk about imperialism in Africa. We're going to use that phrase, carving of Africa. We're going to connect it to King Leopold and the genocide of the Congolese people. It's very specific. But we're also going to attach it back to the source. So one thing we want to do in strong essays is to never do one of these, become tangential. Just forget the source completely. The source had some big rocks. The source had rocks like strong and weak and cornerstone. We're going to make sure that we keep using those rocks in the body. That's only going to bring our analysis up further, and it's going to make our essay more purposeful. Please keep those big rocks as the foundation of your essay. Again, you're writing the same essay on your final. No, you don't get to bring your notes in, but yes, I would encourage you to keep working on it. So, I'm not going to assign homework because ultimately there's stuff that needs to be done to be successful that cannot be assigned. And when you go to university, and this is meant to be where you're headed in this course, your professors are not going to assign breadcrumbs to get you to the goal at the end. They're going to say, here's the goal at the end, and they hope that you understand the breadcrumbs to get there. The purpose of this course is to teach you how to breadcrumb your way to success. So this is the essay you're writing for 9% of your course, again on the final exam. How do we breadcrumb our way to success here? Let's keep looking for those big rocks. Let's look for words like exploitation and strong and weak and cornerstone. And let's continue to collect that key vocabulary so that instead of linguistically, instead of being straightforward, which is a 60, there's nothing wrong with that. But when students come to me and they're frustrated with a 60, then my comment is, well, how can your language be more purposeful? You need to add more social studies vocabulary. Well, how can I do that? Do you have a time machine? You need to go back in time, and over the last 5 weeks, you need to take notes of key language. So when I say a term like death of birth, and I will be doing that lots in the days to come, and I write it on the board and stuff, that needs to be an aha moment, like, aha, this fits into the essay. So, another category is communication. And that's out of 8 marks. It's a big category. And on some essays, students are handing in stuff that's still in blue, meaning all you need to do is click on it, and Google is going to fix it for you. So one of my comments that I ended up putting on a lot of people's essays, please give yourself some time at the end. So, in terms of time, I'm giving you an entire day to write an essay. When your parents were in high school, they had to write 70 multiple choice questions and an essay in 80 minutes. Now, we don't give you 70 because that's too much. We give you 40 or 50, maybe 60 on the diploma, but we give you like 5 hours for that. And we give you another 6 hours for the writing assignments. We give you 11 hours. So the message there being is that there should be some time built in to edit your work. And there's some students that there's a typo or a capitalization error in every sentence. So when there's a communication mark out of 8, if there's an error in every sentence, I'm not sure that I can say that you have a conventional understanding of language. I would say that your writing is awkward, that you lack control over mechanics, that your grammar is inconsistent, your vocabulary is imprecise, and errors definitely obscure the clarity of communication. That's 40%. I don't want to see anybody get 40%. When we get to our diploma exam, usually nobody gets a 40 in our school. Because by the time you get in grade 12, you understand the program. You're into the breadcrumbs. So, we can look through this and we can see that evidence. But please, when you show me evidence, tell me the so what and who cares. Link it back to your thesis. And link the thesis back to the body. So here we have another essay. This is the first one. Looking at evidence, we've got that Peloponnesian War. We have the island of Milos. So you're seeing very specific stuff, right? We have Columbus, we have 1492. The evidence should be, and it is, it's the stuff we studied in class. We're going to talk about indigo, we're going to talk about the British, we're going to talk about mercantilism and Mohandas K. Gandhi. We're going to talk about their protest. And instead of just saying, oh man, there's some protests, we're going to be very specific about it. The Dadasani Salt Works. And the more often we're specific like that, it becomes quite impressive. We're going to link it to contemporary stuff. We studied Bechtel and Cochabamba and Bolivia and World Bank and IMF and the exploitation. So it's not just, hey, this is what happened in history. We're going to show that, you know what, this unfortunately is still happening today. There's still a level of exploitation of the strong feeding on the weak. So I don't need you to write more. I don't need you to write a 10-page essay. That's not what I'm asking for. Neither of these essays were 10 pages. And they're double-spaced, and the font is 12. One of the students handed it in font 11, and I blew it up to 12 because that's the suggested font size. So we're asking for an essay that's in the 4 to 6 page range. And you can get 100%. If you can leave Social 10, say, you know what, I know how to do A1. I know how to do the sources. And many of you have showed me that you know how to do that. Many of you, most of you, have achieved 80 or above on a set of A1 already. So check. You've mastered that. Now the next thing is, can I do A2? Check. Once you do that, once you can write this essay on the final exam and do an excellent job, my comment for you in grade 11 or 12 will be, hey, remember when you did that one in globalization? Remember the structure? So we're going to be referring back to this. Remember the steps you did for the analysis? Remember your thesis statement and how it drove your body? Remember how you collected vocabulary throughout the unit so that you could add it to the language within the body? The same steps will lead you to success in grade 11 and 12. But once you can write an essay well once, you can do it again. Because part of it is just knowing what to do. Once you do your first layup in basketball, it becomes a whole lot easier to do another layup. And that's what this is meant to do, is to give you an opportunity to do well. Maybe I'm making it too easy by giving you the exact same source again. But I'm not trying to make it difficult. My goal is that you can learn the process. So, I'm not going to assign this homework every night, but what you might want to do is go back, read the comments I gave you on your A2, and see if you can improve it. Theoretically, I shouldn't even have had them back to you yet. But I like to get the assessment back to you so that it's not stale assessment. So what was the turnaround date? Like 2 days. You wrote your essay, then within 2 days you get the document back. So you can read it and you can remember reading it, or you can remember writing it, and then you can make those corrections. So now if you wait 4 weeks before you look at the document again, it's going to become stale. And that'll be on you, not me, because I got it back to you in 2 days. So now that you have your feedback, what are you going to do with it? I just showed you what the E's look like. How are you going to make your paper into an E? How are you going to go back in through the analysis, and how can you add to it? And then what kind of argumentation could you use that will allow you to be successful in this unit to come? Because we're about to do chapter 9 today. We're going to be done chapter 9 today. Like that. As we do chapter 9, you should be saying, why are we doing this? Why? Right? You need the why. Why am I doing this? And hopefully the why is so that you can move on to bigger and better things. Right? Hopefully the why is that you have some kind of goal. You want to be a. Now I'm sitting in front of a class of people that will become lawyers and doctors and scientists and plumbers and all of these great things that we need in society, nurses. So that's a part of the why, right? That's part of why we're doing it. But another part of the why is you need to be able to look at the content of chapter 9 and say, why are we doing this stuff? That's why we have the essay already, is to give you the why. This essay is your why. What we're doing in chapter 9 today is to help you write the essay for the next time. So, I'm going to stop recording this. I'm going to tell you what to do with chapter 9. Then in just under half an hour, we'll have our mass break. And then we'll come back in from the mass break and we'll wrap up chapter 9, what I get you to do. And then I'm going to talk you through chapter 9. And then we're going to be moving on. So there's a lot of content left. But the content is there just this year, so we can get you to understand the process. I really want to see all of you in Social 30-1. And I'm not just saying that. I want to see all of you there. When we have 5 or 6 10-1 classes, and we have 1 or 2 31 classes, that's not great. I get it that there are programs you can get into with 30-2. So if you're like, well, you want Ms. McBride, I want to get into engineering, and I don't need 30-1, and 30-2 would be easier. I totally get that. But not everybody leaves WCHS with only one plan. We want you to keep as many doors open as possible. And literally, there's 3 things to look at. And once we can figure out the A2, then we can start tackling that other thing, which is multiple choice. How many people are happy with their multiple choice score? Right? There's some people that did well. So there's some people that did well, but maybe not everybody's happy. We need to wait like maybe 2 days, and then you guys kept your tests. I can give you your Scantrons back. And then if you come in at 8:30 in the morning, and you're like, you know what, I still don't get number 14, we can go over 14 kind of stuff together. But we're not going to go over the test as a class of 30, because there's people that got 90 and above on it. They're going to be sitting there for another 80 minutes thinking, what are we talking about? Of course the answer is C. And we have those 20 minutes built into the time right at the beginning of the day. So give me a couple of days, because there's a couple of students that haven't wrote it yet, and they need an opportunity to do so. But I'd like to get the Scantron back to you so that you can look at the answers, or better yet, look at the ones you didn't get right, and try to see if you can figure out what was your obstacle. And just some optimistic words of encouragement. I've seen some students go from getting 40s and 50s and 60s on multiple choice to getting 80s and 90s on multiple choice. That multiple choice, much like this, it becomes a formula. We just went over a formula here. And if you're getting success in the writing, but not in the multiple choice, that's actually encouraging because it's not the content. You understand the content. Now we just have to work together on the multiple choice and get you there. But I don't want to work on A1, A2, and multiple choice all at the same time and just create confusion. So let's master the essay, and then we'll start throwing more multiple choice at you. So, any questions about the essay? So what you could do in this next unit is, throw me some rough copies, but that's pretty much all essay talk I have left in me. All right, so I'm going to stop the video and then I'll tell you what to do in chapter 9.